Oh my goodness, look at this front page. I mean, this is something that you just wouldn't see now. They've been dubbed the Harry and Meghan of their day, insisting on trying to break the mould and forging lucrative commercial careers alongside their royal duties. From career conflicts to high-profile scandals, including a bizarre PR stunt which ended in humiliation and a sensational tabloid sting which set them against the royal family. Prince Edward and Sophie have navigated an almost impossible path to become among the most trusted members of the firm, and what lessons other royals like Harry and Meghan can learn from their remarkable journey. First reports appeared about Prince Edward's romance with Sophie Rhys-Jones back in 1993. Now this was a time after the Annus Horribilis in 1992, when we had the collapse of Prince Charles and Diana's marriage, and we had the first reports emerging of the demise of Prince Andrew's own marriage to Fergie. And it was also the year of the devastating fire at Windsor Castle. So this emerging romance between Edward and Sophie was just what the royal family needed at that point. After a 6-year romance, Edward and Sophie announced plans to be married. And they did so at St George's Chapel, which was quite a contrast. Previously we'd had the huge weddings of Charles and Diana at St Paul's Cathedral, and the almost equally grand wedding of Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson at Westminster Abbey. So it was a real contrast to that. Prince Edward told reporters when asked what kind of wedding the couple were planning, he replied, "A family one, hopefully. I mean, there's no such thing as a private wedding, but I hope that it will be predominantly a family wedding." And we see that in the photographs from the wedding. I mean, look how relaxed everyone looks. It's clear that it's a small family occasion there on the steps of St George's Chapel. The one that really struck me of all the wedding snaps was of Queen Elizabeth. I mean, look at this. She looks so joyful and just relaxed and happy, like any proud mother at a wedding. You know, she looks delighted that her youngest child has finally got married. In some ways, it's not surprising that the Queen looks so relieved and happy, because Prince Edward had quite a difficult path in his early career. This photograph shows Prince Edward during his Royal Marines training. Now, apparently he'd always wanted to join the Royal Marines from being a small boy, and he was following the example of his elder brothers, who'd all served in the military. He enlisted in the Royal Marines back in 1986, but it soon became clear that it wasn't for him. In this photograph, you see him embarking on a 6-mile hike with an 85 pounds pack on his back, and he was only in for a matter of 4 months. And it did cause something of a scandal when rumours started to emerge that he would be leaving. Obviously, with the royal family's close links to the military, they were always expected to serve. And there were rumours that his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, was not happy about his decision to pull out. At the time, people said that his father, Prince Philip, was very unhappy with the decision, but actually, since then it's emerged from private secretaries and others that Prince Philip was understanding. He felt it wasn't the right move for Prince Edward. But if the royal family thought that Edward's decision to pull out of the Royal Marines was bad, what followed later that year in 1987 was much, much worse. Just look at this photograph. What this was the Grand Knockout Tournament. It became known as It's a Royal Knockout, and I actually remember watching it as a boy. So there was a very popular TV programme called It's a Knockout, where people would compete doing, it was sort of like an assault course, you know, with inflatables. They used to dress up as, you know, vegetables and stuff. And Edward thought it would be a great idea to do a royal version. And I think he also thought it would help sort of redeem himself in the public eye if he organised a successful event. You can see on Fergie's cape here and Princess Anne that you can see the letters "Save the Children," a charity which Princess Anne has long been associated with, and the Duchess of York's charity as well. So it was all for a good cause. So he tried to persuade all the members of the royal family to take part. Wisely, you might say, Prince Charles and Diana wanted nothing to do with it. Apparently the Queen was advised that it was probably going to be a disaster, but you know, it was one of those episodes that people thought, it could be fun, let's see how it works out. It was a hugely popular TV event. I think more than 18 million people in Britain watched it. It raised an awful lot of money for charity, I think about £1.5 million. And not many people know that there was actually another version of it in America with celebrities taking part. But in terms of how the royal family was seen, it came to be seen as something of a disaster. Now, what made the press coverage of the event even worse was the press conference that followed it. It was hosted by Prince Edward, who'd organised it, obviously wanting the event to be a huge success. But the reporters who'd been sent from around the world to cover it were stuck in some tent. They hadn't actually watched the tournament itself. So I think that they were in quite a bad mood anyway. And the reaction that they had to the event really seemed to enrage Prince Edward.
And I know the captains have enjoyed themselves. I only hope that you've enjoyed yourselves. Have you? Well, thanks for sounding so bloody enthusiastic. What have you been doing in here all day? Have you been watching it? Yeah. What did you think of it? Thanks.
I thought it was great.
So look at that. So Prince Edward actually stormed out of the press conference. And my goodness, the coverage the day after was terrible. When the Daily Mail's most celebrated columnist, Linda Lee Potter, she described him as Prince Brat. It's time Prince Brat learned real manners, she wrote in her column. And that really was a reflection of the coverage afterwards. I mean, it's understandable how Edward felt. He put an awful lot of effort into organising this event, which he hoped would be a great success. And the coverage of it really did seem to enrage him. Despite the failure of his first big event with It's a Royal Knockout, Prince Edward decided to pursue a career in show business. First of all, he worked with the impresario Andrew Lloyd Webber for his theatre production company. And then he decided to set up his own production company called Ardent. Here we can see him posing clearly for photographers on what was meant to be his first day at work. It reminds me a bit of the photo my parents took of my first day as a reporter on a local newspaper. You know, there he is looking at his watch, making sure he's on time, got his smart suit on, his coat. But it all felt a bit like he was sort of playing at being a businessman. During this period, Prince Edward faced unfounded rumours about his sexuality, which were very persistent. Fast forwarding to 2001, and what was probably the worst year in Prince Edward and Sophie's career, certainly. Now this is a photograph of the Daily Mail front page when it was discovered that Prince Edward's TV production company had been stalking Prince William at St Andrews University. Now, to explain the context of this, in order for Prince William to have a peaceful education, all the newspapers and other media companies agreed to leave him alone while he was studying. So essentially they would take photographs of Prince William on his first day arriving at St Andrews, but after that he'd be left completely alone. Well then one day, as this report reveals, Prince William spotted a film crew who'd been apparently taking pictures of him. Well, that caused a bit of a scandal, but then when he looked into it, it turned out it was his Uncle Edward's production company. Prince Edward had been making a programme about St Andrews, and I think he said it was just to get some sort of background shots or something. But broadcaster and Mail columnist Andrew Neil, who was then the rector of St Andrews University, said, "The intrusion by the production company owned by the prince's uncle beggared belief, even after he had been told they did not leave immediately. But for it to be broken by a company owned by his own uncle, well, you just couldn't make it up." Now, this incident deepened the rift that was already apparent between Prince Charles and Edward. As Richard Kay writes here, Charles had already warned Edward and Sophie that refusal to give up their careers would lead to trouble, and how right he was. Oh my goodness, look at this front page. I mean, this is something that you just wouldn't see now. You know, it's a different time in journalism, but, you know, world exclusive in the News of the World. Sophie, my Edward is not gay. Now, this was the same year, 2001, and I think I ought to explain the context behind this interview. Sophie was victim to a sting by the News of the World, which sent its undercover reporter dressed as an Arab sheikh. You know, he became known as the fake sheikh. and he posed as a potential customer for her public relations business. And at his prompting, she made a series of comments that would be seen as very embarrassing. But probably worst of all, and something which dragged the royal family into a political scandal, was she was critical of the then Prime Minister Tony Blair, critical of his attitudes towards the countryside, and critical of his presidential style, as she put it. So it caused a real problem. But the News of the World agreed not to publish this expose after pressure from the palace. And in return for not running it, Sophie gave them this world exclusive interview with this, frankly, really humiliating. This is a couple that have, been married a while, and having to give an interview like this was a real humiliation, but she did because she thought it would keep the other scandal off the front pages. And when it came out in other newspapers that there'd been these comments by Sophie and this scandal, the News of the World decided to run it anyway. So then they had the following weekend splash was about the scandal itself. So it really was the worst of all worlds. And it was a scandal that many people thought Sophie and Edward would never recover from. As a result of this scandal, they gave up their job. Sophie stood down from her firm and gave up that private work. It was an early prelude to the problems we've had with Harry and Meghan. They thought they could combine private work with public duties, but it became clear that it was too difficult. There were too many problems associated with that. Now, many thought that this scandal would really sour relations between Sophie and the Queen. But actually, look at this photograph. This was taken the same year, it was at Christmas at Sandringham. And it shows the truth that was the Queen wanted to comfort Sophie essentially. And I think she had genuine sympathy for her. She knew, and Prince Philip did too, that it was a sting, that she was drawn into it. She probably definitely said things that she regretted. And the Queen stood by her, and publicly stood by, as we see here. And again, you see sort of coordination, really. You see the Queen with her quintessential bright colours to stand out from the crowd, and then Sophie wearing the more subdued colours to sort of blend into the background almost. Now, a few days later, we have this photograph, which to me really symbolises that close relationship between the Queen and Sophie. In the back of the car, sharing a blanket. I think it was the Queen's way of showing affection for someone, and we saw it on her day trip many years later with Meghan, that it was her way of welcoming someone into the royal family and showing that she was putting her faith in them, essentially. Now, this photograph is one of my favourites. It actually illustrates that relationship even more closely. It shows the Queen adjusting Sophie's hat. They appear to be joking with one another. Sophie sort of laughing at some private joke, but Sophie's smiling at the camera while the Queen adjusts her hat. And it shows the bonds of affection between them that really became very deep over time. And Sophie's determination to work at that relationship is shown in this earlier photograph. She wasn't actually married to Prince Edward when this one was taken, but she was his girlfriend and she was going out riding with the Queen, which, as everyone knows, was the best way to bond with the Queen. She looks a bit uncertain to me. She looks like she's sort of clinging on, desperately hoping that she's been given a good horse. But it's clear that she was determined to really make a go of that relationship. Now, there are many photographs of Sophie looking relaxed and happy with her mother-in-law over the years, but this is one I particularly love. It's at a Women's Institute event, and they're having a laugh together. It's something to do with the cake. You can see Princess Anne lending a hand. She's got the knife in her right hand, and Sophie having a good giggle. And we often see this in their relationship. I think it's particularly since the death of Sophie's own mother in 2005, it seemed to sort of draw her even closer to her mother-in-law. Now, Queen Elizabeth wasn't the only member of the royal family that Sophie, is able to have a laugh with. I mean, look at this picture. This was at Royal Ascot when Sophie was sharing a carriage with Prince William and Catherine. And it's one of my all-time favourite royal photographs, actually. I think what had happened was Sophie had, as they were getting out, it's quite tricky from these carriages, she sort of tripped over and fallen towards Catherine, who'd looked alarmed and sort of held her off before she collapsed on top of her. But there's a real sort of joy in this. You know, it was a joyful occasion at Royal Ascot. They're there to have fun. And I think this sort of really epitomises what Sophie has helped bring to the royal family in that sense of joyfulness and fun. Now this is another photograph of Sophie with Catherine. And again, it's a very poignant one. It's taken at the Christmas Carol service, which Catherine has helped organise and which has become a bit of a regular thing together at Christmas. It was the service in 2022 when it came after Queen Elizabeth's death, so it was a particularly poignant service. And Sophie was there, I think they were comforting each other. She sat next to Catherine, and it really emphasised that the closeness and the bond that they forged together. This photograph for me is a really meaningful one. It came at Trooping the Colour this year in 2024, and it was after Catherine's first public appearance following her cancer treatment. And Catherine had been there on the balcony with William. And here's Sophie as they left the balcony after greeting the public, just putting a reassuring hand on William's back. Seemed to be sort of saying, well done, you know, you got through that. I know it's been hard, but it really was a reflection of her, the warmth actually of the family and the closeness that Sophie's brought to that relationship. Now, possibly the most significant photograph in this collection is actually one in which Sophie doesn't feature at all. The reason is that Sophie took this photograph herself. It was when the royal family were at Balmoral, their estate in the Highlands in the summer, and it was at a beauty spot that's particularly important for Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip. Now, most photographs that we see of the Queen and Prince Philip, they're quite stiff and formal. They're often on public occasions, but this is them in a really relaxed, unique setting. It was a photograph that was released after Prince Philip's death, and it showed the close bond that Sophie had with them, that you could tell they were totally relaxed in her presence, and they were just enjoying a rest, perhaps a picnic on the estate. And I think for me, it's the picture that sums up Sophie's relationship with the royal family best. Now, this is a really interesting photograph of Sophie and Edward because it illustrates one of their other roles in the royal family. We've heard a lot about Catherine as a peacemaker, the sort of diplomat often trying to mend fences. Well, here we have Sophie, who also has played that part. Here we're at the Commonwealth Day service back in March 2020. And Edward and Sophie were positioned between William and Catherine on the front row at the service and Harry and Meghan on the second row. And it seemed like they were there as a sort of buffer between the two warring couples, but also to try to sort of bring some peace to the event. Particularly interesting because Giles Brandreth, who's friendly with the Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip, he pointed out on an episode of Palace Confidential that the Queen had actually suggested Sophie would be a good person to introduce Meghan to the royal family, you know, because she'd been an outsider and she'd had difficulties of her own. You know, the Queen thought that Sophie would be a perfect person to really act as a mentor and help Meghan. But it became clear that Meghan really wasn't interested in having any mentor. She didn't feel she needed it at all. Sophie was devastated by the death of her mother-in-law, and that was very much evident at Queen Elizabeth's funeral. But even then, she acted as a peacemaker. We saw her accompanying Meghan. Obviously, there were great tensions at that point, but it looked like Sophie was trying to diffuse them. She was often seen with Meghan. And then at one point, she seems to be, you know, passing her a tissue or something from her handbag. She seemed to be very much in that role of, I'm doing my best to ease any tensions and try and make what was a very difficult day pass as peacefully as possible. Now, Meghan wasn't the only member of the royal family that Sophie was comforting. We see her here with Princess Anne. You know, it was real raw grief etched on both their faces after the Queen's death. And here you see her putting a tender arm around Princess Anne's back. You know, Princess Anne is seen as very, very strong, very sort of no-nonsense character. We don't often associate her really with sort of public shows of affection, but here, you know, Sophie's putting that arm around her and, you know, really doing her best to bring her some comfort. Prince Edward and Sophie have taken on more royal duties since Prince Harry and Meghan and Prince Andrew quit royal duties, and since the deaths of Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip. They've also shown how to keep a happy marriage for such a long period within that goldfish bowl which is the royal family. It was seen most movingly actually at the 60th birthday celebrations of Prince Edward. Sophie made a really heartfelt speech. She referred to Edward as my darling husband, and she talked through his achievements, comparing him to his father Prince Philip, and ending with, "I'm so proud of the man he is. He is the best of fathers, the most loving of husbands, and still is my best friend. So here's to you, my darling Edward, and may I, along with all your family, and so many friends and many others, wish you the happiest of birthdays." The Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh's journey hasn't always been an easy one, but they have navigated public relations disasters and scandals to become integral members of the royal family. Could Harry and Meghan learn anything from their journey? I hope you enjoyed that. For more great royal videos, make sure you subscribe to the Daily Mail Royals YouTube channel. Oh wow, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this is one of the most striking pictures ever taken of a royal couple. It's amazing that an image can say so much. It's also, I don't think unfair to say, absolutely absurd. From a fairy tale wedding to exile in Hollywood, the story of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle has become a saga of relentless drama. Once the golden couple, they've traded royal pomp for Californian sunshine, but their lives remain firmly in the spotlight. Their carefully curated public displays of affection continue, but beneath the surface, what's the real story? In this episode of Reading the Royals, I'll delve into their body language to reveal the shifting power dynamic and how Prince Harry may have unwittingly become Meghan's spare. Let's go back to September 2017, when after weeks of speculation, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle officially appeared together in public for the first time. None of us knew then what a dramatic new chapter it would be for the royal family. We're at the Invictus Games in Toronto in Canada, which was set up by Harry and William's Royal Foundation and is a cause hugely close to Harry's heart. So the choice of location is very significant. So too is the fact that they were together at all, as usually a couple would have to be engaged before appearing together like this. The first thing you notice is how touchy-feely they are. The royal family, as you might expect, are very formal and traditional. We rarely see them even holding hands at official engagements. But this is them saying that they want to be different. Meghan looks relaxed and happy about the situation, while Harry seems to be displaying more protective body language. Remember, this came after Meghan had apparently gone against protocol and talked about their relationship in a controversial cover story for Vanity Fair magazine. Later, Harry insisted that the palace put out an unprecedented statement complaining about a wave of abuse and harassment from the press and on social media. Although not obvious at the time, this occasion set the tone for the rest of their relationship, that they are a very tactile couple determined to do things their own way. Who can forget these pictures, taken just 2 months later when the couple officially announced their engagement? It's also the first time that we're introduced to a key element of Meghan's body language, where she not only holds Harry's hand, but also grasps his arm. Daily Mail contributor and body language expert Judy James calls this the double clutch. Actress Meghan here shows she's no newcomer to the photo call. Harry, meanwhile, is more stiff and formal. The hand in the jacket is a bit like something his father King Charles might do. Perhaps he's just less used to the sort of less formal approach. The photo call for his brother Prince William, for example, was much more regal. Meghan looks like she's trying to warm him up by rubbing his arm. It reminds you of what people have said more recently of the couple, that Meghan is like a wife and a mother to Harry. Despite the picture of warmth of the interaction here, we know that not all was well behind the scenes. According to Harry's memoirs Spare, William had issued an unwelcome warning to his brother, suggesting that the relationship might be moving too fast. It was a similar story for the first TV interview. Look at the arm stretched across him and how she leans right into him. Meghan's the dominant one here. Harry was a confident public speaker, but he's nothing compared to Meghan. We just hadn't seen this sort of interaction from the royals before. Think back to the more modest appearances from the much younger Catherine and Lady Diana Spencer, who were both younger and both looked quite shy. They let their fiancés take the lead. Let's take a look at a key part of Harry and Meghan's interview.
So it was definitely a setup. It was a blind date.
It was a blind date,
and,
for sure.
And it's so interesting because we talk about it now, and even then, because I'm from the States, you don't grow up with the same understanding of the royal family, and so while I now understand very clearly there's a global interest there, I didn't know much about him, and so the only thing that I had asked her when she said she wanted to set us up was, I had one question. I said, well, is he nice?
But when you compare this to what they said in their 2022 Netflix series, you start to see the contradictions. Things such as how they actually FaceTime before their first meeting weren't shared in their engagement interview, along with the discrepancies in the book Spare. It's another reminder of the inconsistencies in their carefully constructed narrative. Oh, this is such a great still from that interview. I mean, it really, you can really see how Meghan is the actress. She's playing up for the cameras. She's performing. I mean, you think of Catherine or Lady Diana and they were just sort of awkwardly, caught like a rabbit in the headlights. But Meghan appears to be enjoying it and really playing up. Just a few days later, the couple got on with the job and undertook their first official public engagement together in Nottingham. This is interesting because Harry does take the lead here. Meghan perhaps seeing that he is more experienced in this stuff. But I think we see later how that changes. Harry had a protective hand on Meghan's back for much of this, as she dealt confidently with the crowds. The people here were pleased to see them. I'm not sure the same would be true if they appeared there today. Now these really are memorable pictures, but beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect day lurked hidden tensions and power plays that would soon explode into public view. In this picture we see the couple exchanging vows and Harry placing a wedding ring on Meghan's finger. But look at her other hand, placed on top of Harry's. One way of looking at it could be that it's a sign of reassurance to a clearly nervous and stiff Harry, but another way of looking at it could be that it's seen as a sign of dominance. Even during their celebratory carriage ride through Windsor, the same dynamic is on display. Behind the smiles are the now well-documented rows that had taken place, from Meghan's father being uninvited to the spat with the Queen's dresser Angela Kelly over tiaras, to the infamous argument with Catherine over the outfits for the bridesmaids. We now know that the late Queen had her own opinions about the wedding, in particular Meghan's very white dress, which, she said to her cousin Lady Elizabeth Anson, was flamboyantly virginal for a divorcee. We're a couple of months after the wedding now, and things are starting to really turn. It seems as though their body language becomes less formal, more clingy, mirroring the growing tensions. This picture was taken of the couple on the Buckingham Palace balcony after the flypast to mark the centenary of the Royal Air Force, and it's one of the first times that we see this gesture from Meghan. You could infer that the roles between the two are starting to reverse, with Meghan leading and guiding. It coincides with reports emerging around the cracks in the Fab Four, which I've covered in other episodes. Just a month before this, there had been an argument over Meghan's discussing Kate's hormones. Meghan stays in the background for much of this engagement, where the atmosphere on the balcony looked very frosty. A happier picture here, with the pair looking as demonstrative as we now expect them to be. Days before this, at the wedding of Princess Eugenie to Jack Brooksbank, the pair had told the family that Meghan was pregnant with their first child. It's also one of the first times that we see this bit of body language, which Judy James calls the hand sandwich, where Meghan holds Harry's hand with both of hers. Judy says it's the strongest form of hand-holding and gives them a romantic couple appearance. It's a move we end up becoming very familiar with. The couple told the rest of the world about the pregnancy as they landed in Australia for their first royal tour, taking in Fiji, Tonga and New Zealand too. But this trip would also mark a dramatic shift in the royal family's attitude towards Meghan, or at least that's what Harry claimed during his interview with Oprah Winfrey in 2021. He claimed the other royals may have been jealous of Meghan's success during the tour, saying, you know, my father, my brother, Kate and all the rest of the family, they were really welcoming, but it really changed after the Australia tour, after our South Pacific tour. It was the first time that the family got to see how incredible she is at the job. Well, there are a few moments from that tour that I want to highlight, in particular this one. This is very early in the tour, and a very similar picture was eventually chosen as the main artwork for their Netflix series. It's very interesting to choose this picture from an important royal tour to front a documentary which criticises the British royal family. It shows them alone, which would have been unusual on a royal tour, bodies slightly inwards, but together, a unit, hand in hand. The next is this. During a speech delivered by Prince Harry in the Australian city Dubbo, despite torrential rain, Meghan chose to stay by her husband's side, holding an umbrella while he spoke. At that time, many were touched by the gesture. She seemed down to earth by doing a task usually carried out by a staff member. Now we can look and see that maternal side to their relationship coming through, while others might see the fact that Meghan is now front and centre at an engagement that was really meant to be about him, not her. It's also the first time we see this, Meghan cradling her baby bump. It was a bit of body language we saw repeatedly throughout her pregnancy, and one that got the nation talking. This image, similar to one they used to promote their series. They're alone, less formal than other royals, a family unit walking away from the glare. We've touched on this image before, but it's worth revisiting. This is December 2018, the last Christmas Harry and Meghan would spend with the royal family, and the atmosphere was anything but festive. While they maintain a semblance of affection for the cameras, the reality is that Harry and Meghan were now at odds with William and Catherine, and Meghan's honeymoon period was over. The rumours of her being a difficult duchess that have stuck around ever since were starting to grow. Here she grips Harry's arm tightly as he is far away from his family. And look at the expression on Harry's face. He looks downcast, awkward, like he'd rather be anywhere than there with his brother and sister-in-law. Let's fast forward a year to October 2019 and the royal tour of South Africa, and a trip that would expose the deep unhappiness lurking beneath the surface. Royal correspondents at the time noted that Prince Harry was more reserved than usual and didn't really interact with the media. Some of the photos like this make them look a little sad and vulnerable. It's also the first time that Meghan revealed in an interview that she was struggling with her new royal role. While many had sympathy for her, others criticised her decision to complain while standing in one of the poorest parts of the world. I mean, look at this photograph. It seems really telling. Meghan is sort of striding ahead on her own, and Harry looks like he's struggling to keep up with her. He looks unhappy. Harry is reaching for Meghan as she walks ahead. Throughout this engagement, both had smiled, greeted well-wishers and held hands. But there's a lot more to this candid moment. Meghan later revealed in her podcast Archetypes that the couple had been told just before this engagement that 4-month-old Prince Archie, who had joined them on the trip, had narrowly escaped a fire in his nursery. Everyone's in tears, everyone's shaken, and what did we have to do? Go out and do another official engagement. I said, this doesn't make any sense. We had to leave our baby. We still had to leave him and go into another official engagement. Here her smile has slightly slipped, and Harry looks very tense. You have to wonder, is this a key moment things began to change for the couple? Things really changed a couple of months later. We're now in January 2020. Usually we see the royals emerge about this point from their festive cocoon in Sandringham, but the Sussexes had missed it, choosing to spend Christmas in Canada. Something was clearly amiss. According to Harry's account, he spoke to the late Queen on 3rd of January about his and Meghan's desire for a different working arrangement. He writes that the Queen was not pleased, but also not surprised. They agreed to meet at Sandringham that week. The meeting was cancelled. Things were rushed as the press had got wind of something big, so a statement was rushed out by the pair, which the Queen hadn't seen. While the rest of the royals were reeling after difficult discussions, Harry and Meghan seem happy. Remember, this picture came the day before they announced that they were leaving. You can almost detect relief on their faces, perhaps believing that they were going to do bigger and better things. When they did announce that they were to step down, this appearance was the one used to illustrate it. You could say that this occasion, where they were at Canada House in London, was the photo shoot for the occasion. Look at the Mail's front page here. It's hard to overstate just how big a deal this was. This image, taken at Mansion House in March 2020, seemed to go around the world at the time. Despite the rain, this was the Sussexes saying that they're on the up, able to weather any storm just by being close together. They seem to be walking towards the light, although this could be the glare of more unwelcome flashbulbs. And look at the bright colours. These are important, as I'll explain next. In their final royal engagements, Harry and Meghan presented a united front of confidence, but a closer look reveals a far more complex dynamic. Meghan, in particular, seemed to have fully embraced her newfound independence, perhaps more so than her husband. Her outfit is noteworthy too, as she later explained. Until that last week in the UK, I rarely wore colour. I never wanted to upstage or ruffle any feathers, so I just tried to blend in. But I wore a lot of colour that week. I thought, well, let's just look like a rainbow. I should say that the claim has since been widely questioned. Here we see the couple attending their final royal duty, the Commonwealth Day service in 2020. It's a moment heavy with symbolism. Look at Meghan's gaze, which is fixed directly on the photographers. It's a confident, almost defiant stare. Harry, in contrast, appears more apprehensive. As we've covered before, inside it was more strained. Meghan maintained a defiant demeanour. She and Harry didn't speak to William and Catherine, and not even Sophie and Edward as peacemakers could fix things. As Harry chillingly wrote in Spare, I felt really distant from the rest of my family. It looked cold, but it also felt cold. Oh wow. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this is one of the most striking pictures ever taken of a royal couple. It's amazing that an image can say so much. It's also, I don't think unfair to say, absolutely absurd. To set the scene, we're in September 2021. We've had that controversial interview with Oprah that left royals and royal watchers aghast, but Harry and Meghan, as an independent couple, still have a huge popularity and interest around them, which is why they're on the cover of Time magazine's 100 most influential list. That a royal couple would ever do a shoot like this is extraordinary in itself, but what does it say about their changing power dynamic? Meghan dominates the image, with Harry positioned firmly in the background. A clear reversal of the roles we might have expected, given that he's the royal. Meghan stands unquestionably confident, wearing bright white and splayed hair stands out, while Harry pops out behind her shoulder, in what just looks a bit awkward, like a child might appear behind an adult's knee or like he wants a piggyback. It was an image that spawned endless memes and comments on social media. One of my favourites was one that described the image as Harry looking like the hairdresser asking Meghan if she likes her new hairdo. This is a scene you'd rarely, if ever, witness from a traditional royal couple. It's April 2022, and Harry and Meghan have descended on the Netherlands for the Invictus Games, their first return to European soil since their dramatic exit from royal life. There might be a reason for the extra public display of affection, as it came just days after a secret summit with the Queen and Prince Charles at Windsor. Do they want to tell themselves and the world that they are rock solid? It's also an example of what Meghan has been criticised for, namely putting herself at the centre of Harry's events. A month later, Harry and Meghan's fleeting appearance at the Queen's Platinum Jubilee was less a show of family unity and more a carefully orchestrated performance, according to explosive claims by royal biographer Tom Bower. Their every move, it seems, was designed for maximum impact and maximum attention. Bower alleges that the Sussexes deliberately arrived late at Wellington Barracks, conveniently missing the coach designated for so-called minor royals travelling to St Paul's Cathedral. This allowed them to make a grand entrance by car, ensuring that they were photographed on the steps. A crucial moment, Bower claims, for their Netflix cameras. But the drama didn't end there. Upon reaching their allocated seats, Bower claims that the couple then attempted to orchestrate a further seating change, asking 6 other guests to move so they could sit on the aisle. This brazen request, according to Bower, was swiftly rebuffed by an usher who informed them that were assigned to specific seats. Harry's reported response, simply "why?" speaks volumes about their apparent sense of entitlement. I remember that moment well, and there were what appeared to be awkward exchanges, and Harry's reaction does suggest frustration. Adding to the sense of distance and estrangement, Harry and Meghan were conspicuously absent from the Buckingham Palace balcony during Trooping the Colour, further fueling speculation about the deep rift within the royal family. This was another carefully orchestrated moment for the Duke and Duchess, Meghan's grand return to the UK stage, her first speech since Megxit. Meghan took centre stage as the keynote speaker at the One Young World Summit in Manchester in September. She exuded confidence, smiling broadly throughout the ceremony and deploying her now familiar touchy-feely gestures towards Harry. Again, we see the almost infantilising of a grumpy Harry, this knee touch a prime example. Whether Harry looked angry because he's seemingly overshadowed by his wife's performance, we don't know. We do know, however, that this came at another tense time, namely when Meghan launched yet another attack on the royal family in an interview with New York Magazine's The Cut. In that interview, Meghan claimed that she and Harry were happy to leave Britain, stating that they were upsetting the dynamic of the hierarchy just by existing before their dramatic exit. She also recounted a bizarre anecdote about a Lion King cast member comparing their marriage to Nelson Mandela's release from prison, a claim that was met with widespread disbelief. Perhaps most damagingly, Meghan quoted Harry as saying, "I lost my dad in this process," further widening the rift with Prince Charles. Royal insiders at the time branded the interview delusional and expressed deep concern about the impact of Meghan's comments on the Queen. Just 3 days later, the Queen died. Harry detailed in his memoir Spare how he learned of her passing after checking the BBC News website. He also revealed that King Charles instructed him not to bring Meghan to visit the dying Queen for what Harry calls nonsensical and disrespectful reasons. Apparently Harry retorted, "Don't even think about speaking about my wife like that," which apparently prompted an apology from the King. This will have been a sad and awkward time for Harry, when his ostracism from the family would be even more apparent. Here we can see them at the state funeral for the late Queen. We can see Meghan with her head bowed and Harry firmly squeezing her hand in reassurance. Meghan spent most of the ceremony without Harry. Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, was the only other royal really to interact with her. She looks completely out of her comfort zone. Harry seems less nervous. And this was probably the most tense moment of all. The first time we had seen William, Catherine, Harry and Meghan together since those final official engagements, and the atmosphere was frosty, to say the least. Meghan's body language here is stark contrast to what we had seen at the One Young World Summit just a week before. Barely a word is passed between the four, and they can't seem to manage to even look at each other. But let's watch that again in slow motion. Look at the expression on Catherine's face. Normally the Princess of Wales is completely unflappable and is impeccable in every situation. But here, she appears to let her emotions come to the surface. Her expression is nothing short of stern and frosty towards Meghan. Harry later revealed in Spare that he and William barely exchanged a word during the entire period. The sad death of his grandmother didn't stop the release of Harry and Meghan's Netflix docuseries and Harry's tell-all memoir Spare in January, both of which were laden with criticism of the royal family. This is a rather extraordinary display of affection at that year's Invictus Games in Germany. Here we see them mimicking each other's behaviour and putting on a united front on the first day of the event. It comes against a backdrop of rumours of tensions behind the scenes. It's also a sign of Harry returning to the joker and performer, playing up to the crowds. The extra exuberance has come as their media projects has faltered, with their big money Spotify deal petering out early. To add insult to injury, an executive at the company, Bill Simmons, described the couple as effing grifters and ridiculed Harry's attempts to contribute ideas for podcasts. A dramatic shift in the power dynamic was on full display during Harry and Meghan's quasi-royal tour of Colombia, a trip orchestrated after the Vice President, Francia Marquez, reportedly watched their Netflix documentary. This photo, taken with the Vice President Marquez, could easily be mistaken for a formal diplomatic or royal engagement. But beneath the surface, a different story was unfolding. Body language expert Judy James noted that Harry had adopted a pose similar to Prince William's, the so-called fig leaf pose. With hands clasped in front, it's often indicative of shyness or nervousness. He was clearly not asserting any dominance. Meghan really goes for the occasion. She's the star of the show, front and centre. Here, he's just sitting like a spare part, perhaps wondering why he gave up doing real royal tours if all he was going to be doing was pretend ones like this. This is an extraordinary picture. Look how unhappy Harry looks. Meghan seems to be like a mother trying to cajole her son into staying out a bit longer and being polite. Throughout this episode, we've seen the precedent normally afforded to Prince Harry gradually erode. The spotlight has increasingly been shared with Meghan, but this tour of Colombia marked a clear turning point. Meghan dominated throughout, leaving Harry looking, for whatever reason, distinctly glum. But it is the couple's so-called professional separation which defined 2024. Harry was seen carrying out solo engagements in New York, connected to his late mother, Princess Diana, and the Well Child Awards in London. Both would once have held much appeal for Meghan. What's been most noticeable is that the Duke has appeared far more relaxed than on his previous appearance in New York with his wife. That visit turned into a fiasco, with claims of a high-speed car chase with paparazzi that were denied by the police. Harry's smiles have also been in contrast to the frowns he often seemed to be wearing when he visited Colombia. A source in California told me that Meghan has decided that their interests are best served by pursuing separate careers. They will still carry out some charitable engagements together and embark on foreign visits, but their work projects will be separate. So is their dream of being the next George and Amal Clooney over? Looking back at these key moments in Harry and Meghan's relationship, from their earliest public appearances to their recent outings, reveals a clear and undeniable shift in power. Meghan, with her unwavering confidence and carefully curated image, has increasingly taken the lead and limelight, while Harry has often appeared uncomfortable, tense, and at times more recently, lost. Has Harry gone from being the spare to the heir to the spare to his wife? Will he be happy in her shadow? Will he find his own purpose and role? Or will their individual ambitions continue to pull them apart? Only time will tell. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Reading the Royals. For more great royal videos, make sure you subscribe to the Daily Mail Royals YouTube channel. I mean, look, this photograph taken almost 30 years ago, but even now would be remarkable. It would be on the front pages of all the newspapers. Look, a member of the royal family having their face taken in both hands by a member of the public. It really does, linger long in the memory. The royal family presents an image of strength and stability, but within its ranks are stories of profound human struggle. Few royals embody this contrast more than Catherine, Duchess of Kent. Behind the scenes, Catherine's life has been far from a fairy tale. She endured a fraught marriage, suffered unimaginable personal losses, and ultimately made the shocking decision to step away from the royal fold. Adding to her mystique, she once held down a secret job that few could have imagined for a royal of her stature. In this episode of Reading the Royals, I'll uncover the key moments that have defined her life, from heartbreak and reinvention to the bold choices that set her apart from her royal relations. Who is the real Duchess of Kent? Join me as I delve into the life of this fascinating and unconventional royal. She wasn't born a royal, but Catherine Worsley's childhood was far from ordinary. She was the only daughter and youngest child of the Yorkshire baronet Sir William Worsley and his wife Joyce. Born in 1933, she grew up in the beautiful surroundings of Hovingham Hall, but behind the chocolate box facade lurked an isolated childhood. Her 3 elder brothers were sent to boarding school, leaving her feeling lonely. She had a fractious relationship with her mother and found school difficult. Catherine became interested in music as a form of escape. She learned 3 instruments until the age of 25 and had hoped that music would become her life. She wanted a career in music, but failed to get into the Royal Academy of Music. What a beautiful portrait. This picture was taken in 1958, when Catherine was 25, Little did she know at the time that her life was about to change forever by the ambitions of her mother and a charming prince. Here we can clearly see her transition from shy, mousy schoolgirl to a glamorous city sophisticate. By now she was courting Prince Edward, the Duke of Kent, a cousin of Queen Elizabeth. It's reported that her mother Joyce persuaded her to end previous courtships so that she was free to marry the Duke. Joyce apparently introduced the couple when she invited Prince Edward, who was stationed with the army nearby, for lunch. Prince Edward was said to be smitten with her and would often visit Hovingham Hall, using the back entrance to avoid the press. While Catherine Worsley's parents gave their blessing, her path to becoming a duchess was far from smooth. Standing in her way was the formidable Princess Marina, the Duke of Kent's mother. Now look at this. We see Princess Marina here on the left, arm in arm with her son, the Duke of Kent, and Catherine on his other arm, the two women in his life. Now for Princess Marina, widowed since 1942 when her husband, the Duke of Kent, was killed in a plane crash, she was determined that her son would marry into royalty. So the prospect of him marrying Catherine, who, although she was the daughter of a prominent Yorkshire aristocrat, he was just a baronet, and for Princess Marina, she was very much a commoner. Princess Marina appeared to be dead set against the match, refusing to let Edward propose. Worried that Catherine, a commoner, couldn't handle the pressures of royal duty, it was a concern that Catherine herself reportedly shared. Marina demanded a year-long separation to test their resolve, while Edward served in Germany. But her harsh tactics only served to strengthen their bond. With no other option, Princess Marina was finally forced to give her consent. With the Queen's approval also secured, as required under the Royal Marriages Act for royals under the age of 25, Edward finally proposed on New Year's Day 1961. Media speculation around the courtship was frenzied and comparable to the later romances of Charles and Diana and William and Kate. And finally, in March 1961, the engagement was officially announced, just a day before this photograph was taken. Catherine's wedding would be a landmark event, the first time in over 100 years that a woman without a title had married into the firm. But this fairy tale beginning masked the trials and tribulations to come. I thought this quote from Lord Bridges about Catherine was very interesting. He said, "I suspect that she undertook the marriage partly out of a sense of duty. In other words, it wasn't the romantic, overwhelming thing that most people have." Just months after their engagement, Catherine Worsley and Prince Edward tied the knot in a spectacular ceremony at York Minster, a venue not used for a royal wedding in more than 600 years. The location was a nod to Catherine's proud Yorkshire roots. It was a grand occasion, 2,000 guests invited, including 3 queens. She wore the Kent diamond and pearl-fringed tiara, and a dress designed by John Kavanagh. Princess Anne was the chief bridesmaid, and the television cameras filmed the ceremony. Catherine had never been a fan of public appearances, but this was watched by 12 million people. The Times reported that she looked pale and exhausted as she walked down the aisle. And look, we can see how pale she was here. It was later reported that Catherine was found crying in the bathroom, fearful that she had made a mistake in marrying the Duke. Taking on Princess Marina's title as the Duchess of Kent, Catherine was immediately thrown into royal duties at their new home, Coppins, just 15 miles from West London. Her quiet life at Hovingham Hall was now a distant memory. Just a year after the wedding, this picture-perfect family portrait was taken, shortly after the Duchess gave birth to their first child, George Philip Nicholas, in June 1962. Contemporary reports confirm that the Duke was by his wife's side for the birth, a picture of marital bliss. But little did they know that their son George, the Earl of St Andrews, would inherit his mother's unease with royal life. Catherine was almost 30 when she gave birth to her first child, which was considered old for a first-time mother of her generation. George was technically a commoner, following a decree by George V that only children of the sovereign, or children of any sons of the sovereign, should henceforth be a prince or princess or take an HRH title. This photograph of the Duke and Duchess of Kent at Uganda's independence celebrations reveals a fascinating glimpse into the early days of their royal life. Just months after the birth of their son George, They were already undertaking significant overseas engagements on behalf of the Queen, who was also raising a young family. While she appears relaxed and regal, waving to the enthusiastic crowds, the reality of leaving her 4-month-old baby must have been incredibly difficult. It's clear from these images that despite her earlier anxieties about royal life, Catherine embraced some of the perks that came with it: the exotic travel, the adoring crowds, and the chance to play a significant role on the world stage. After the whirlwind of royal duties and the pressures of public life, the Duke and Duchess of Kent found an unexpected sanctuary in Hong Kong. Just a month after their demanding tour, they relocated to a small 3-bedroom apartment, a far cry from the opulent estates of home. This period, however, became a time of genuine happiness for the couple, a chance for Catherine to shed the constraints of royal life and embrace a more relaxed existence. Noel Coward, a close friend, observed in his diary that they were merry as grigs and having a lovely time, untrammelled by royal pomposity. This experience fostered a lifelong love for Hong Kong, its culture and its food in Catherine. It's a striking image, the Duchess finding solace in a simple life, decades before Prince Charles would stand in the driving rain to witness the end of British rule in the former colony. The Duke and Duchess of Kent's return to Europe in 1964 marked a turning point in their marriage. The Duke's posting to Germany had meant a significant change for the Duchess, who found herself back at Coppins, their family home in the pretty Buckinghamshire village of Iver. This charming photo shows her with their newborn daughter, Lady Helen. It was reported that the Duke arrived just in time for the birth, which took place in the same room as their sons. Lady Helen would later make history by becoming the first royal to use the family surname, Windsor. But for the Duchess, this was the beginning of a new reality, adapting to life as an army wife, which would mean enduring long separations from her husband. This compelling image of the Duchess in 1967, resplendent in her academic robes as Chancellor of Leeds University, hints at a hidden side to her royal life. Following their return to the UK 2 years previously, the Duchess embarked on a path of dedicated service to education, while simultaneously fulfilling her increasing royal obligations. The Kents travelled the world representing the Queen, attending momentous occasions such as the independence of British Guiana and Barbados, and the coronation of the King of Tonga. But away from the pomp and ceremony, the Duchess led a remarkably different existence. In the quiet village of Iver, she was simply Catherine, a valued member of the Women's Institute and a regular at the local shops. This almost schizophrenic existence, torn between two vastly different worlds, reveals the inner conflict that would come to define her. In 1968, Princess Marina died following a brain tumour. It was decided that Catherine would take on 8 of her patronages, leaving her once sparsely filled diary absolutely packed. It was around this time that the Kent marriage was becoming semi-detached due to the couple's diverging interests. The most difficult thing for Catherine at this stage was juggling her new work schedule and the demands of being a mother of 2. Her role at the University of Leeds was the first that had nothing to do directly with the royal family or being an army wife. This seemingly simple photograph would set a royal precedent for decades to come. It's 1970 and the Duchess of Kent is leaving King's Cross Hospital with her newborn son, Lord Nicholas Windsor. In a departure from royal tradition, she chose to give birth in a hospital, a decision made in consideration of her age. The scene outside the hospital was a media circus, crowds of well-wishers, photographers and TV crews eager to capture the first glimpse of the new royal baby. This image would become the blueprint for future royal births. In the years since, there have been similar moments for Princess Anne, Princess Diana, Sarah, the Duchess of York, and most recently Catherine, Princess of Wales. But look at the difference here. In their cases, we've always seen the father of the baby with her, but my goodness, Catherine looks lonely, on her own there with the newly born Lord Nicholas. Behind the smiles and the public celebration, a stark reality emerges. The Duke was stationed in Cyprus, leaving the Duchess to face this significant moment alone. This family portrait, while appearing happy on the surface, foreshadows a period of deep personal suffering for the Duchess of Kent. It's 1973, and the Duke and Duchess have sold the family home Coppins to supplement Edward's army income and allow living in a grace and favour home at St James's Palace. And it's around this time that the Duchess longed to extend their family, but the years that followed this would be marked with sadness. Along with losing both of her parents, the dream of having another child would end in tragedy. In 1975, the Times carried a small article detailing that the Duchess of Kent was suffering with German measles. It would be many years before it emerged that she was also pregnant at the time. The condition presented a grave danger to the unborn child, leading a top royal physician to recommend a termination. For the Duchess, who was deeply religious, this must have been an agonising dilemma. Lord David Coggan, then Archbishop of Canterbury and a close confidant of the Duchess, later said that the decision troubled her throughout her life. Just 2 years after her previous loss, tragedy struck the Duchess of Kent once more. This photograph, taken at the 1977 FA Cup final, just weeks before the announcement of her pregnancy, shows her beaming with happiness, a stark contrast to the heartbreak that was to come. Despite experiencing some health issues, the Duchess bravely continued with her royal engagements until October, when it was announced that she was suffering from complications. The Duke was immediately summoned back from Tehran, where he was on an official visit, and reportedly raced to be at his wife's side in hospital. It was he who had the unenviable task of informing the press that their baby son, Patrick, had been stillborn. This agonising ordeal left a deep scar on the Duchess, and years later she courageously broke royal protocol by speaking openly about her subsequent battle with depression. Her willingness to share her experience helped pave the way for mental health campaigns like Heads Together, later championed by Prince William, Prince Harry and Catherine, the Princess of Wales. In 1997, the Duchess described the impact of the loss as the most devastating effect on her. She admitted, "I had no idea how devastating such a thing could be to any woman. I don't think I gave myself time to get over it." This same year, Catherine was admitted to hospital. Officially, she was said to be suffering from nervous strain, but it became clear that she was suffering a nervous breakdown. It was a tumultuous year for the royal family. Princess Margaret was divorcing Lord Snowdon, while Earl Mountbatten was murdered by the IRA, along with his 14-year-old grandson. According to her biographer Mary Riddle, the Duchess was so distraught by the loss of her son that she would chat about him as if he had lived. The tragedies of these years, coupled with the Duchess's deepening depression, placed an immense strain on the Kents' marriage. Raised in the emotionally restrained world of royalty, the Duke's upbringing stood in stark contrast to the Duchess's more tactile and sensitive nature. Rumours swirled at the time that the couple were even considering divorce, a truly shocking prospect for the royal family. But it's been alleged that the Duke made a solemn promise to the Queen there would be no separation. Ever mindful of royal protocol and desperate to avoid any action that would displease the monarch, the Duchess remained steadfast in her commitment to upholding the image of a united front. Yet despite this public facade, the couple began to lead increasingly separate lives in the years that followed. This poignant photo, taken in 1979 at the memorial service for Lord Mountbatten, captures a moment of shared grief despite the growing chasm in their relationship. It was these shared struggles with heartbreak and royal life that forged a deep and lasting friendship between the Duchess of Kent and Princess Diana, who would later face similar challenges in her own marriage. This candid photo, taken on the Buckingham Palace balcony during Trooping the Colour in 1990, shows the two women relaxed and at ease, sharing a private joke. The Duchess, having navigated the treacherous waters of royal duty in a complex marriage, became a trusted confidant and advisor to Diana during critical moments in her life. Their shared experiences of grief, depression, and the often isolating reality of royal life created a unique and powerful bond that endured until Diana's tragic death in 1997. Catherine would later say that she understood Diana very well for obvious reasons, implying that she had first-hand experience of some of the more awful aspects of the princess's life. Now this image captures the Duchess of Kent in a setting that the nation grew accustomed to seeing her, Wimbledon. For 30 years she accompanied her husband, the Duke of Kent, who was president of the All England Club, to the prestigious tournament. She became a beloved figure, known for presenting prizes and offering genuine compassion to the runners-up. But this public image of grace and composure masked a growing struggle with her health. This photo, taken alongside Lady Diana in 1981, reveals a hidden detail. The Duchess is wearing a surgical collar beneath her clothing to support a displaced disc. It was a sign of things to come. In 1982, she was hospitalised due to severe abdominal pain, and the following year she was forced to cancel public engagements for surgery to remove an ovarian cyst. Her health continued to deteriorate in the ensuing decades, with diagnoses of Epstein-Barr virus, ME, and finally celiac disease. Yet these debilitating conditions remained largely secret, and the Duchess bravely maintained a packed schedule of public appearances, cheerfully presenting prizes at Wimbledon and fulfilling her royal duties with unwavering dedication. Now this famous image of the Duchess of Kent comforting a tearful Jana Novotná at the 1993 Wimbledon final is perhaps her most well-known moment and a powerful demonstration of why she was so different from other royals. As she presented Novotná with the runner-up trophy on centre court, the Duchess offered words of comfort, telling her, "I know you will win it one day, don't worry." This display of tactile compassion was still a rare sight from a member of the royal family at the time. "That's what you do when people are crying," the Duchess later explained to the BBC. "We are quite normal people, we do hug people who cry, it is a natural reaction." But this heartwarming gesture was not the Duchess's only act of kindness at Wimbledon. In a remarkable secret act of compassion, she helped reunite tennis legend Martina Navratilova with her mother in 1979, 4 years after Martina had fled communist Czechoslovakia. After the player's defection, her family faced severe repercussions from the Czech authorities, losing their jobs and being barred from travelling to see her. The Duchess, deeply moved by Martina's victory at Wimbledon in 1978, without her family present, intervened, ensuring that Martina's mother could witness her daughter play on centre court the following year. 1993 was a year of significant change for the Duchess of Kent, and not just because of her now famous Wimbledon moment. A chance encounter with a nervous primary school teacher from Hull would lead her down a remarkable and unexpected path. Hearing the teacher's anxieties about teaching music, the Duchess felt compelled to help, volunteering to teach the children to sing, and so began a 13-year secret. Once a week, she would discreetly travel to Hull to teach music, leading a double life far removed from the pomp and circumstance of royalty. This photograph, taken from a 2004 documentary more than a decade later, offers a rare glimpse into this hidden world. The Duchess, using the alias Mrs. Kent, managed to keep her royal identity a secret from most of her pupils, thanks to the discretion of school staff. It's a truly extraordinary tale of a royal embracing a completely different life, hidden from the public eye. "I was just known as Mrs. Kent," she told an interviewer in 2014. "Only the head knew who I was. The parents didn't know, and the pupils didn't know. No one ever noticed. There was no publicity about it at all. It just seemed to work." Catherine took up a voluntary position, travelling once a week to Wansbeck Primary School on the Long Hill Council Estate in Hull. In 1994, she pushed the boundaries of royal protocol once again by converting to Catholicism. This dramatic decision made her the first member of the royal family to abandon Protestantism since James II's deathbed conversion in 1685. Despite being the head of the Church of England, the Queen gave her blessing to the Duchess's deeply personal choice. It is thought that the profound personal tragedies that she had experienced played a significant role in her embrace of the Catholic faith. Her youngest son, Lord Nicholas, her grandson, Lord Downpatrick, and her granddaughter, Lady Marina, have all followed in her footsteps, also converting to Roman Catholicism. Alongside her royal duties and secret teaching career, the Duchess of Kent dedicated an extraordinary amount of time to charitable causes, serving as patron, president or representative of more than 100 organisations. This powerful image captures her being greeted in a slum area of Varanasi, northern India, during the 50th anniversary celebrations of UNICEF, a charity she first became involved with in the early 1970s, leading to extensive global travel. This striking photograph shows her warmly greeted in a slum in Varanasi. This image perfectly captures the Duchess's deeply compassionate nature. She was particularly drawn to charities focused on children, music and the elderly. It was in this arena that the true Catherine shone through. Despite her royal status, she remained remarkably down to earth, pioneering a compassionate and hands-on approach to charity work that would later be emulated by Princess Diana. I mean, look, this photograph, taken almost 30 years ago, but even now would be remarkable. It would be on the front pages of all the newspapers. Look, a member of the royal family having their face taken in both hands by a member of the public. It really does, linger long in the memory. This well-known photograph of the Duchess of Kent presenting the Venus Rosewater dish to Venus Williams in 2001 marks a poignant moment, her last appearance on centre court presenting prizes. It was around this time that a bitter dispute with the All England Club, that her longer-standing involvement with the tournament, came to an end. The Duchess was reportedly deeply upset after being refused permission to seat the 12-year-old son of a bereaved friend in the coveted royal box. A curt letter reminding her that children, other than royals, were strictly forbidden is said to have sparked her fury. In a dramatic response, the Duchess threatened to boycott the royal box altogether, and she kept her word. In the years that followed, she continued to attend Wimbledon, but she chose to sit among the ordinary spectators. In 2002, the Duchess of Kent made a momentous decision, one that stands in stark contrast to the highly publicised departures of other royals. She quietly withdrew from royal duties. At the age of 69, after more than 30 years of loyal public service, her decision was met with the full support from the rest of the royal family. The Duke of Kent, known by the royal family as Steady Eddie, is still a stickler for duty and is now the oldest working member of the royal family. But the Duchess went even further than other royals who have stepped back, making the extraordinary request to relinquish her royal title. In a rare interview, she asked the BBC to call her Catherine and explained her humble motivation. "I don't like being a public figure. I say that very humbly. It's my nature. It's the way I was born. I like doing things quietly, behind the scenes. It's the way some of us are built." My colleague Richard Kay also revealed that the Duchess shunned further trappings of royal life, including chauffeur-driven cars, for taxis, and even the bus. It's hard to imagine other royals who have stepped away from public duties doing the same. This understated exit speaks volumes about the Duchess's character. After leaving public duties and eventually teaching, the Duchess launched a music charity, Future Talent, which aims to help gifted children develop their musical prowess. The charity now works with orchestras such as the Halle in Manchester and links them with primary and secondary schools. The Duchess later admitted to having an open mind when it comes to music and has a fondness for rap, including Eminem and former NWA member Ice Cube. She told a newspaper, "If you see someone on the M40 motorway looking particularly dotty, it's me trying to rap in the car going home." Despite remaining married for more than 7 decades, the Duke and Duchess of Kent in later years had largely lived separate lives. One close friend told Richard Kay in 2002, "It's simple. He lets her do whatever she likes because it makes for fewer arguments between them." In the following years, the Duchess chose to spend most of her time at the couple's home in Oxford, while the Duke remained in London. Here we see them together during a rare outing at the Queen's Diamond Jubilee celebrations. Despite the reported emotional distance between them, Catherine appears arm in arm with her husband. The following year, in 2013, Catherine moved back into Kensington Palace after the Duke had a stroke. It's said that the couple are closer now than they have ever been. With her public duties and royal titles behind her, Catherine is rarely seen over the 2 decades following 2002. She would make fewer and fewer appearances at ceremonial events, choosing not to attend the funeral of Queen Elizabeth or the coronation of King Charles. In 2023, the Duchess made a rare public appearance with her husband on the 62nd anniversary of their wedding in early June. Catherine joined the Duke at St James's Palace, where a portrait of her was unveiled by her daughter, Lady Helen Taylor, after a concert by the Future Talent Group. The concert was organised as a celebration of the Duchess's 90th birthday in February, and her husband thoughtfully requested that it was performed on their wedding anniversary too. This heartwarming appearance is believed to be their first joint public engagement since Princess Eugenie's wedding in 2018. And in October the following year, we saw the couple appear together again outside their Kensington Palace home, when the Duke was serenaded by bagpipes to celebrate his 89th birthday. The couple were joined by their son, Lord Nicholas Windsor, and the Duke's younger brother, Prince Michael of Kent. Here the Duchess is aged 91 and we see her for the first time in a wheelchair. Catherine Worsley's journey into the royal family was fraught with challenges and opposition, yet she not only weathered the storms of public scrutiny and personal tragedy, but also made a unique contribution to the monarchy. Her openness about her struggles, her dedication to charitable causes, and her willingness to break with royal protocol made her a true original. She successfully balanced the demands of her royal role with a deeply personal and often hidden life, as both Catherine, Duchess of Kent, and the down-to-earth Kate from Yorkshire. Her story is one of resilience, compassion, and the courage to live authentically, even within the confines of royal life. I hope that you've enjoyed this episode of Reading the Royals. Please remember to subscribe to the Daily Mail Royals YouTube channel for more great royal videos, and I'll see you next time. Is there a more fun or funny picture of the royals than this one? It's just brilliant. They are two outsiders who married princes, became favourites of Queen Elizabeth, and are key to the future of the British royal family. They have forged an unbreakable bond during the darkest times. Here on Reading the Royals, I'll explain how Catherine, Princess of Wales, and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, became one of the most important partnerships in the royal family. We'll look back at some era-defining photos and look at how their relationship has grown and developed despite, and perhaps because of, the problems faced by the royals over the years. We'll start in 2011 and Trooping the Colour. This is a major occasion in the British royal and military calendars. It's a military parade held to celebrate the monarch's birthday, with all the pomp and grandeur you could hope for. This was the first major appearance for Catherine since her marriage to William that spring. It was reported that in addition to the millions watching the footage around the world, there were reported to be record numbers of people around Buckingham Palace, many hoping to catch a glimpse of the new Duchess of Cambridge. Dressed in an Alexander McQueen outfit, Catherine more than looked the part, but could have been forgiven if she had been nervous that day. Thankfully, she had Sophie to talk to, making her feel comfortable. They're turned into each other here, and Catherine looks pleased to have someone to talk to. Sophie had been the nervous new girl before, and is really making the effort here to include Catherine. However welcoming the family, it's always hard joining a new one, let alone one so famous and in the public eye. We can see from this second picture that they're off to the side, where Catherine could have felt more estranged. But Sophie is like the bridge to her and the rest. Remember, although Catherine deserved her place there had been lots of discussion as to whether she was royal enough. While the press were positive about her, she had faced jibes like weighty Katie due to her long courtship with William, while there was lots of snobbery in some quarters because of Catherine's very middle-class background. Before becoming a successful entrepreneur, her mother, Carol Middleton, had been an air stewardess, something that even William's friends were said to have made fun of. This experience was something that Sophie knew only too well. Although she was never likely to be queen, she was the daughter of a tyre salesman. Her lineage was far less noble than other incomers such as Lady Diana Spencer or Sarah Ferguson. And what's more, Sophie too had a 6-year romance with Edward before he proposed, raising questions among royal watchers. If young Catherine was looking for someone who got it, so to speak, she had found that person in Sophie. A few months later, and they were back on a balcony together, something they would get used to over the years in the royal family. Here they are chatting. It's not that they're making light of the occasion, it's just that there are more relaxed moments before and after the commemoration begins. Although they seem to have a natural chemistry, their proximity was not just because of this. It was a deliberate plan by the Queen to ease Catherine into the firm. Both Sophie and Camilla had offered to act as sort of mentors to her as she found her way. As Katie Nicholl writes in her biography of the now Princess of Wales, Camilla and Sophie were extremely useful in advising her on how to behave, how to dress, and what she should and should not do at court. Sophie especially was able to relate to Kate. Like Kate, she was a modern royal bride. The Queen saw great things in Sophie, both in character but also experience. Remember, she was a public relations expert before she joined the family, and that sense of maintaining appearances is always so important for the royals. These are just some of the reasons why Her Majesty thought Sophie would be the perfect person to pass some of her knowledge on to the future Queen. It's only a year, but I think Catherine here looks more relaxed and more comfortable as she returns to the famous Buckingham Palace balcony. Who does she talk to again? Her mentor, Sophie, a woman who we now know is good at putting anyone at ease. The outfit coordination may have been accidental, but you really notice the friendly eye contact here, and also how they mirror their stances, standing straight, turning to each other, and with their hands in front of them, a sign that they are connecting with each other and building a rapport. There was a funny twist to the mentor-mentee relationship that would have inevitably come up behind closed doors. Kate would have been studying a little-known book called The Order of Precedence in the Royal Household to help her understand the complexities of royal protocol. It basically describes who ranks above or below whom, who Catherine needed to curtsy to, and who had to curtsy to her, and how that changed when she was with William or alone. It's in this area that Katie Nicholl makes another interesting point in her book, Kate, the Future Queen. Now that Catherine was the Duchess of Cambridge and a future queen, Sophie was expected to curtsy to her, as were other so-called less senior royals. You can imagine that this could have annoyed someone less appreciative of the family's traditions than Sophie, but it never seemed to affect their relationship. You also get the sense that Catherine respected Sophie too much for it ever to be an issue. To 2016 now, and an image which is not only really nice, but also marks a development for Catherine. It's a great image because they are so relaxed. It really looks like they're acting as though the camera isn't on them. It shows that the laughter from Remembrance Day 5 years earlier wasn't a one-off. They really do enjoy each other's company. They are at Wimbledon, one of Catherine's favourite places, and an event that she has become really involved with. Look at the hands and you'll see that there's more mirroring going on. 2016 was a particularly big year for Catherine at the All England Club, to give it its proper name, as it was the year that Queen Elizabeth handed over the royal patronage to Catherine. So this year, she was the host, if you like, and could invite people such as Sophie to enjoy something that was and is still very special to her. Is there a more fun or funny picture of the royals than this one? It's just brilliant. The pair here at Ascot, the annual horse racing festival that is very close to the hearts of the royal family, in particular Queen Elizabeth, who loved to go all 5 days of the festival if she possibly could. Other royals will pop in for other days and get to ride in carriages where they will wave to the crowds. It's a key moment in the summer social scene here in the UK. 2017 saw the then Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, William and Catherine, sharing a carriage with the Earl and Countess of Wessex, also known as Edward and Sophie. This wouldn't have been their first time riding like this, but for some reason, the motion caught Sophie out and meant she almost landed in Catherine's lap. There's even a nice moment between William and his uncle Edward caught in the background. The group was still laughing as they got out of the carriage to go and join the Queen to watch the racing. Would it have been as funny if other royals were involved? Maybe, but I think it's Catherine and Sophie's familiarity here that really makes it a fun moment. It's perhaps surprising that there haven't been more joint engagements between Catherine and Sophie over the years, given their friendship and popularity. But it might be a desire on the part of the palace to separate them, because they are just so good on their own, and the powers that be need to spread their resources widely and wisely. Whatever the reason, here is one occasion that they were together for an event at Buckingham Palace in 2018. It was to celebrate a new creative initiative called the Commonwealth Fashion Exchange. Catherine, who was 7 months pregnant at the time, wore Erdem, while Sophie chose Burberry, with both looking suitably stylish for an event where they met key figures from the fashion world. What's interesting from my colleague Rebecca English's report at the time is that while Catherine might have been technically the more senior royal, she let Sophie take the lead. Rebecca wrote, "Sophie very much took charge, confidently handling the fabric of a dress made by Lucian Mathis, followed by Kate. Isn't it amazing," she declared as Kate looked on, gently touching her growing baby bump. Royal weddings always provide great photos of the royal family, but Princess Eugenie's to Jack Brooksbank in Windsor in 2018 almost provided a very embarrassing one for Catherine. As she left the chapel, a gust of wind caught her dress. Thankfully, by her side was Sophie, who reports said at the time helped her avoid an unfortunate revealing moment. This is perhaps an early sign of why Rebecca English described Sophie as Catherine's wing woman. We could all do with someone like that to stop us embarrassing ourselves. There's another interesting element to this picture too. This was an early occasion where Meghan Markle was a public part of the royal family. The late Queen had hoped that Sophie could provide the same sort of mentoring and help for Meghan that she had given Catherine. After all, look how well that had worked out. But Meghan didn't want to know. Catherine is also said to have reached out, to use the modern term, but was also rebuffed. Look at the loyalty and family that Meghan walked away from. Fast forward to 2020, and we see Sophie as both the diplomat and buffer for Catherine. We have seen this image before in this series, but it's because it's such an important one. This time we can look at it from the point of view of Catherine and Sophie. This was just before Megxit became official. The strains beforehand had become intolerable for all concerned. While the royals all recognised the importance of the Commonwealth Day service, particularly the part it played for Queen Elizabeth, I don't think it's unfair to say that some of those in this picture would have wished that they weren't there. While Meghan glares and Harry simmers, Sophie breaks the ice by talking to Catherine. With their husbands talking too, the atmosphere changes, and the impression given to the outside world is that things might not be as antagonistic as they could be. Harry and Meghan may not like it, but the show must go on. There is a strong joint sense of duty for both Catherine and Sophie, who were as keen as each other to do as much as they could during the difficult era of the COVID pandemic. In another relatively rare joint engagement, albeit a virtual one, they spent the day speaking to nurses, thanking them for their hard work during the most difficult circumstances. I love this picture of Sophie giving Catherine an almost mischievous grin as she arrives at the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham in 2022. Perhaps it's a sign that she knows how often they end up laughing when they're at public events together. The body language expert Judy James has described their friendship as naughty, fun and cheeky. I'm also reminded of something that former BBC royal correspondent Jenny Bond told Mail Online. She noted that the pair have often been seen enjoying a private joke in public, and certainly seem more like sisters than aunt and niece by marriage. Sophie has retained a girlishness about her, while Catherine, perhaps because of her very senior role in the family, sometimes seems mature beyond her years. This picture is also a reminder that the two love sport. Catherine works hard to stay fit and loves an engagement that lets her throw a ball around, while Sophie's commitment to fitness is so dedicated that she once undertook a 450-mile charity cycling challenge. The pair were joined in grief at the funeral of Queen Elizabeth later that year. The sorrow is etched on their faces. While they would, of course, have recognised the national importance, one thing that they both agree on is the importance of family. They are both very close to their own families. They both have really grown into their husbands' ones too. Royal biographer Ingrid Seward has said of the pair, they are both incredibly kind girls and have a caring side to them. They are both protective of their children. Sophie has had a young family, so she knows what it's like trying to protect them while being in the royal world. Here, Catherine is mourning a grandmother figure, and for Sophie, a surrogate mother. One courtier is even quoted as saying that she was the late Queen's favourite child. Forget about her real children. Both are saying goodbye to the woman who welcomed them into the royal family and helped set their paths. Buckingham Palace was back to its resplendent best for the coronation of His Majesty King Charles III. And right at the centre of the action were these two, their coordinated outfits only reinforcing the point that these two are very close. Catherine looks like she's talking to someone she can trust. It's reminded me of an extraordinary quote from a senior royal source to a tabloid newspaper after the death of Prince Philip. The source said, "For all that has been said about Prince Charles being the one leading the way to shape the monarchy and to streamline it to ensure its survival, it will be up to these two, Sophie and Kate, about how they support the way forward." Powerful words, and an article at the time suggested that these two, who just get on with it, will be vital in helping shape the next generation of royals. Here are those two getting on with it and coordinating outfits, something we see a little more of now at a Buckingham Palace garden party. Both really seem comfortable in their own skin and comfortable in their roles. The matching blues and hats in the perfect surroundings of Buckingham Palace make this a timeless picture. I think it's significant that this was posted by the now Prince and Princess of Wales on their social media accounts. Mark Foster Brown, a close friend of the Edinburghs, told the Mail, "Sophie has been a very positive reference point and sounding board for the Duchess of Cambridge. Their relationship has really strengthened. It will be absolutely critical for the Princess to have a female backup." The Fab Four were meant to be William, Catherine, Harry and Meghan, but we all know what happened there. I'd say this foursome at the Order of the Garter was pretty fab. The Order of the Garter is an ancient order of chivalry, with members chosen by the monarch. Each year members dress up in their gowns, sashes and feathered hats and parade before a special service in Windsor. We've seen Catherine laugh before at William, who always seems a little uncomfortable. But here, she and Sophie can have a little joke about the old-fashioned outfits. They just seem to be enjoying the spectacle together. It is, of course, William and Edward who are the members of the Order of the Garter. Catherine and Sophie have not yet been given that honour, but surely it's only a matter of time before they too get to dress up and parade through Windsor. Back to Royal Ascot in 2023, and this picture is just so much fun. Here's Catherine giving a very knowing look at Sophie. It's clear there's a big joke here, which we sadly aren't party to. Being a member of the royal family can be lonely, as there are so few people who really understand the challenges and pressures. One person who does, of course, is Sophie, and this picture to me sums up just how comfortable they are able to be together. Royal biographer Claudia Joseph has described it as an unbreakable bond. The Powells were back together just before Christmas that year. The now annual carol service organised by the Princess of Wales is very important to her. She worked very hard to get the event off the ground, and now it has become a firm fixture in the royal calendar. So who should she choose to sit next to her and play a key role every year? The now Duchess of Edinburgh, of course. This picture is both very moving and very significant. We're back at the Cenotaph in London for the annual Remembrance Day event, and once again these royal ladies are next to each other on the balcony. This occasion had particular poignance as it marked a return for Catherine to public life after an incredibly difficult time receiving treatment for cancer. Royal biographer Robert Jobson said it showed how the family were looking after the Princess of Wales by providing what he called a protective bubble. Sophie here is a reassuring presence to Catherine, who appeared unexpectedly but understandably nervous. Sophie will have more understanding than many after her own health problems. She was described as being minutes from death following a complicated birth of her daughter, Lady Louise. It was as they turned away from the occasion that the blink and you'll miss it moment took place. Sophie's gentle hand on Catherine's back. You could say it was her simply letting the more senior royal lead the way, but I think there's more to it. It's a comforting and congratulatory hand that says, "You've got through this." It's a gesture that speaks volumes. Ingrid Seward has described the Duchess of Edinburgh as being there in the background during Catherine's illness as part of her private support network. Seward also says the move marked a small but significant change for the royals. The royals have always shown a human side, but there is more warmth now, she says. That gesture of Sophie putting her arm around Kate is something you wouldn't have seen a few years ago. What a long way they have come, from tentative relations to a key friendship that will sit at the heart of the future of the monarchy. Catherine's role in the family and the country will be the more outwardly important, but I would say Sophie's will be growing with her. She will be vital for Catherine, whether it's as a confidant, sounding board, wing woman, or someone just to have a good laugh with during the long royal engagements. I hope that you've enjoyed watching this episode of Reading the Royals. For more great royal videos, make sure that you subscribe to the Daily Mail Royals channel on YouTube.